great pleasure and privilege to be here with Governor Dukakis, Professor Nye, and all of you. Let me start this way. Let me start not in the South China Sea, but in the Caribbean. Because there was a great American-Dutch geopolitical thinker in the 1940s, Nicholas Spikeman, who called the Caribbean the American Mediterranean, because it was so important and critical for the Western Hemisphere. That the Western Hemisphere was not divided between North and South America, but between north of the Amazonian jungle and south of the Amazonian jungle. So that the Caribbean was really the center of the hemisphere. And once the United States, after it settled the continent, it pushed out into the blue water extension of that continent in the greater Caribbean, Gulf of Mexico, the Caribbean proper. This was a long process, started in the early 19th century, ended after the beginning of the 20th. And once the United States got control of the Caribbean strategically, it essentially had strategic control of the Western Hemisphere. And with that, it was able to affect the balance of power in the Eastern Hemisphere, and that's what happened in the 20th century. China, I believe, is trying to do something similar with what I call the Asian Mediterranean, being that the South China Sea, with the East China Sea included, is really the heart of the Asia-Pacific maritime Asia. What is China trying? What does the South China Sea mean for China? It's a blue water extension of their continental landmass. If they can take Macau, Hong Kong, essentially economically take outer Mongolia, which they have done. The South China Sea is the natural blue water extension of what they want. The South China Sea also has, and this often goes unstated because it's not a sexy subject, it has enormous amounts of fish, a tenth of the whole world, and which China really protects. And the oil and natural gas is disputed in the sense that it's controversial just how much is there. There's a lot of expert opinion that it's been exaggerated, the amount that's there, but it's substantial, however much there is. Also, for the Chinese to essentially deny the American Navy unimpeded access to the South China, to Asia's marginal seas, the East and South China Seas, and have China have a truly multipolar military landscape with the American Navy. We give China's Navy, which is growing and growing, and by Navy I mean land-based ballistic missiles, cyber. Naval is, the word naval is complete for a lot of military areas. It would give China greater access to the outer Pacific, and more importantly, the Indian Ocean, through the Strait of Malacca. If you think of the Strait of Malacca as the Panama Canal, which was done by the United States once it got strategic control of the greater Caribbean. And I use this metaphor because it was a Chinese senior colonel who said to me, why should we act any different in the South China Sea than you Americans acted in the Caribbean? They know our history very well in terms of the Caribbean. And if we, through the Strait of Malacca, China would have unimpeded access to the Indian Ocean. And the Indian Ocean is the global energy interstate, across which the oil and natural gas from the Arabian Peninsula and Iranian Plateau goes across to the customers in East Asia, essentially. East Asia being the degree that the world economy has a geographic organizing principle, it's more East Asia than any other place, so to speak. And so China is developing a great navy, specifically a great submarine force on Hainan Island in the northwestern part of the South China Sea. China has about 63-odd submarines, nuclear and increased, but more importantly, the quietest, most advanced diesel-electric submarines, which are more suited for the coastal water, the noisy coastal waters of the South China Sea. China picks fights with the Philippines because the Philippines is a treaty ally in the United States. So by So by being in some sort of tension with the Philippines, China can poke the Americans in their eye without actually saying so or doing so. This has made Vietnam the latest de facto ally of the United States. The Vietnamese would like, greater American naval air force presence in the region to balance against China. What do we learn from this? I think we learned that East Asia is not so much about ideas as it's about nationalism. Zero-sum lines, not in the sand, but in the blue water. Who controls what? Whose territory is what? This was not a problem in the 60s and 70s because the Vietnamese, the Malaysians were involved in internal wars. Japan was in a state of quasi-pacifism emanating from the aftershocks of World War II. China was internal focused, first on Mao's depredation, then on the first decade or two of Deng Xiaoping's new economic mechanism. But now that these countries have really are better institutionalized and are at peace, they're projecting power outwards, and so they tend to come into conflict over who owns what. I don't think this is going to lead to war outside of the possibility of an accident. An incident, rather. I think what it indicates is a more crowded, nervous world, kind of like the conflicts of globalization. Globalization is in some degree all about container traffic. And container ship traffic means navies, to protect sea lines of communication. So you have seas that are more crowded than ever with both warships and merchant ships in some of the busiest sea lines of communication of the world. I think we should not, because of this, we should not take Asian security for granted. In the sense that for too long in the media, war was seen as, oh, that's the Middle East, that's Africa, now it's Ukraine, Asia's about business, essentially. Asia's, I would say, it's about high-end military rather than low-end military conflict. It's about cyber, naval, air, ballistic missiles, because all these countries, now that they're institutionalized better than the 60s and 70s, and this is another lesson, is that sustained capitalist growth leads to military acquisitions. Because think of it, Asia's had decades, a third of the century, 40% of a century of sustained economic growth since the late 70s when the first Pacific Tiger economies emerged. And what have they done with that growth? They're buying land. Because that's what tends to happen. You tend to get rich, you tend to develop interests in the outside world that you never had before, you want to defend those interests, prestige enters into it, and suddenly you're acquiring military hardware. I think, finally, the elephant in the room here that often does not get discussed in all discussions about Asian security, maritime conflicts in the South and East China Sea is the Chinese economy. See, there seems to be two separate debates going on about China. One is it's all about the South and East China Sea, naval conflict, the possibility of it. What do the Chinese want? Is there a way to compromise with them? And in this debate, China seems unbeatable. It just gets stronger and stronger, more submarines, more ballistic missiles, etc. Then there's another debate about China's economy. And all the news on that debate tends to be very bleak and negative. Just how big an economic implosion will China have? Will it be dramatic? Will they muddle through over the next decade? And nobody seems to know. Everyone's hedging their bets outside of a few commentators. And I would say that the degree to which the Chinese economy deteriorates will tell us a lot about this other debate, about China's ability to continue to project more and more power in the South and East China Sea. Because if it's a normal economic contraction, which one would expect after 30 years of dramatic growth, if they can get their growth rate down from 7.5%, ultimately 4 or 5, without great social unrest and massive unemployment, then China will pull through, and I think China could be the dominant power in the Pacific in the decades to come. But what if it's something more dramatic that leads to real dramatic social unrest and political unrest with Turkic Uyghurs in the West, with Tibetans in the Southwest? Could that then make it harder for China to keep projecting full power? I don't have the answer to that, but I do know that the economic debate has to also come in, also has to be connected with this